There are a lot of badass figures in Philippine history. Names like Luna, Bonifacio, and Lapu-Lapu would always come to mind, whether it would be Luna's fiery temper in battle, or Bonifacio's skills with the bolo, or Lapu-Lapu's strategizing. Filipino male prowess was often demonstrated throughout history. But Filipina heroines have also contributed to the badassery of the Filipino people. Their achievements had cemented their roles in Philippine history, and they continue to inspire Filipinas today. So today, we'll be looking at the stories of 5 of the most badass Filipinas in history. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the Kabilin Center channel. It'll help us immensely. Now stop your TikToks and get ready to know these badass Filipinas. Arguably the most famous of all Filipina heroines, Gabriela Silang was remembered for leading her fellow Ilocanos in a revolt against the Spaniards. Despite always being mentioned alongside her husband Diego Silang, Gabriela also made her mark in Philippine history by being the first Filipina to lead a rebellion against a foreign power. The rebellion was initially led by Diego Silang in 1762. Shortly after the British occupied Manila during the 7 Years' War. Diego Silang, however, was assassinated in 1762. His wife, Gabriela, fled to Abra and rallied her husband's allies and supporters. She took over as leader of the revolt in Ilocos and achieved a priestess status amongst her community and followers. Her popular image as the bolo-wielding female warrior on horseback stems from this period. She then launched guerrilla attacks against Spanish garrisons. Her tactics made the Spanish forces fear her. Gabriela Silang managed to win some victories against the Spaniards, but it didn't last long. During her final battles at the liberation of Vigan, Silang led around 2,000 men and went against an army of around 6,000 Spanish troops. The army was also supported by a powerful artillery force. On the 10th of September 1763, Silang attempted to besiege the town of Vigan, but the Spanish retaliated. Her forces were defeated and Silang was forced to go in hiding. She later retreated to Abra along with 80 of her troops, where she was later captured by the Spaniards. The Spanish made her witness the public executions of her troops before publicly hanging Silang. Gabriela Silang was executed in Vigan's Town Plaza on the 20th of September 1763. You probably heard a lot about Tandang Sora. Perhaps if you find yourself in Metro Manila, you can find her name in one of the busiest thoroughfares in Quezon City. Melchora Aquino, also known as Tandang Sora, was born on the 6th of January 1812 in Caloocan. A daughter of a peasant couple, Aquino never attended school, but according to some sources, she was literate at an early age and was a talented singer. She was also known to have been chosen, often, as the Reina Elena during Santa Cruzan. She later married Fulgencio Ramos and bore him 6 children. Her husband died when their youngest child turned 7, and she was left to care for their children as a single parent. Prior to the Philippine Revolution, Aquino opened a store which later became a refuge for sick and wounded revolutionaries. She then joined the secret organization known as the Katipunan. Her house also became a secret meeting place for the Katipuneros. Apart from taking care of the Katipuneros by treating them and opening her house for meetings, she also gave motherly advice to and prayers for the revolutionaries. This earned her the moniker Mother of the Philippine Revolution. She was present when Andres Bonifacio declared a revolution by the tearing of cedulas during what is now known as the Cry of Balintawak. As mentioned, Aquino took care of sick and wounded Katipuneros in her house during the outbreak of the revolution. These motherly activities later caught the attention of the Guardia Civil, the Spanish local militia. Aquino was arrested on the 29th of August, 1896, and was held captive in the house of a local official before being transferred to Bilibid prison in Manila. She was later deported to Guam, then a Spanish colony, by Governor General Ramon Blanco. In Guam, she was placed under house arrest along with Segunda Puentes, a fellow Katipunera. When the Americans took over the Philippines in 1898, Aquino and other exiles returned to the country, now an American colony. She later died on the 19th of February 1919 at the house of her daughter, located in what is now Tandang Sora, Quezon City. Imagine leading men in 3 major conflicts, fighting alongside them, and surviving through these conflicts. One badass Filipina from the Visayas had managed that. Her name, Teresa Magbanwa y Ferraris. Born in Pototan, Iloilo to an affluent household, Magbanwa became a school teacher in Haro, Iloilo, and later in Manila. She earned a teaching certificate at the Colegio de Doña Cecilia in 1894 and a master's degree at the Universidad de Santo Tomas. She then returned to her hometown and taught in the local school. Her students described her as a strict disciplinarian. She later met and married Alejandro Balderas, a wealthy landowner, in 1898. She later quit her teaching job and became a housewife. Despite having a domesticated lifestyle, Magbanwa learned how to shoot a pistol and ride on horseback. Magbanwa became so proficient in horse riding that she could manage to travel on horseback over rugged terrain. Before she settled down in 1898, Magbanwa joined the Katipunan while she was teaching in Manila. And when the revolution broke out in Iloilo, she wanted to help with the revolutionary effort. While she wanted to be involved in the revolution, her husband was against it. Magbanwa was not deterred, and she later joined the war against Spain. Because of her skills as a master shooter and horse rider, she was given command of a battalion of Bolos skirmishers. She led her battalion during the Battle of Barrio Yating in Pilar, Capiz. She emerged victorious in the battle against the Spanish garrison, and this victory earned her the nickname Visayan Joan of Arc. On the 24th of December 1898, Magbanwa participated in the liberation of Iloilo from Spain. And when the Spanish went out and the Americans coming in, Magbanwa also fought during the Philippine-American War in Iloilo. She helped defend Iloilo City and Haro from American forces in 1899, but was later defeated. She later fought with her brother, General Pascual Magbanwa, in successfully retaking Haro from the Americans. But when the Americans captured the Filipino forces' headquarters in Santa Barbara, she resorted to guerrilla warfare. Her valiant efforts would come to an end in 1900 when she surrendered to the Americans and returned to farming. 40 years later, the Japanese invaded the country during World War II. She no longer actively fought the Japanese due to her old age, but she did what she could to resist the Japanese occupation. Magbanwa sold her personal belongings and properties to help finance and supply local Filipino guerrillas. Already destitute, she moved to Pagadian, Zamboanga del Sur, where she died in 1947. To have lived through 3 periods of colonial rule and to have fought and survived 3 defining conflicts had cemented her place as one of Philippine history's most badass women. A relatively unknown figure in history, Salud al-Gabre, also known as Generala Salud, was a Filipina revolutionary who advocated for independence and peasant rights during the American period. Charismatic and educated, Salud was one of the most underrated heroines in Philippine history. Salud was born in 1894 to an upper-class family in Cabuyao, Laguna. Several members of her family fought during the Philippine Revolution. When the war ended with the American annexation of the Philippines, the family returned to a quiet life in their farms. Salud was sent to Manila in 1903 to obtain a formal education. Unfortunately, her mother stopped her schooling due to fears of Salud being taken away to the United States by her American teacher. And so, her education continued with private tutors. Gabre was known to be quite the beauty as she had several suitors. She later met Severo Generalia and married him in 1915. Severo was the president of the Tobacco Workers Union of the Philippines and got involved in labor movements. After some trouble in Manila, Salud and her husband went back to Laguna despite the loss of their lands. Salud toiled as a landless peasant and lamented over the inequalities of land shares between the peasants and the landlords. This made her join the Sakdal movement in the 1930s. The Sakdal was a social and political movement that advocated true Philippine independence and land redistribution. She began to build up support for the Sakdal in the rural areas, and her house became its frequent meeting place. She rose through the ranks and became the only female leader of the movement. In 1935, the Sakdalistas mounted an armed uprising in Laguna. Salud was one of the leaders who led a group of men in defending Cabuyao. The brief uprising was brutally crushed by the Philippine Constabulary. Many of the rebels were killed and Salud was arrested. She was pardoned by President Manuel Quezon and later released. During the Second World War, Salud was accused of collaborating with the Japanese and was once again arrested after the war. Salud continued to oppose the rich who held on to their vast land holdings. Salud Gabre died on the 2nd of May 1979. She was once interviewed by a scholar about the failure of the Sakdal movement and their ideals. However, she never regretted the role she played in the movement as she valued that highlight of her life. No uprising fails. Each one is a step in the right direction. In a long march to final victory, every step counts. Every individual matters. Every organization forms part of the whole. A seasoned cinephile would remember iconic spy characters like James Bond, Ethan Hunt, and Jason Bourne, or even female spies like Evelyn Salt and Bridget von Hammersmark. But one real-life female spy from Cebu could trump them all. Flaviana Ramos was born on the 4th of July 1914 in Tawi-Tawi, Jolo, to a Tausug father and a Cebuana mother. She later moved to Manila when she was 15, where she ended up in a nightclub catering to the wealthy. She later met Ioannis Constantine Vassilas, a wealthy Greek businessman and scholar. He wooed her and the two eventually married. Despite being childless, the marriage was a happy one, as Vassilas was proud of his half-Muslim wife. Even though she was illiterate, Flaviana displayed an appetite for learning. She became quite educated, well-mannered, and full of wit. Vassilas brought Flaviana to Greece and they traveled to Egypt. While in Japan in early 1940, Flaviana and Vassilas sensed the imminent war about to engulf her country. But Flaviana quickly learned of the Japanese language and of their mannerisms, skills that would serve her well in war. When the couple arrived back in Cebu, World War II broke out and the Japanese took control of Cebu a few months later. Flaviana was concerned for the safety of her foreign husband, but the oppressive nature of Japanese troops pushed her to join the resistance, despite the protest of her husband. Vassilas escaped to Manila but was captured by the Japanese and executed. When word of her husband's death reached Flaviana, she was fueled with a desire to defeat the Japanese no matter the cost. Using her beauty and wooing skills, Flaviana seduced her way to obtaining vital information for the Cebuana guerrillas. Her heroic acts went as far as posing as the mistress of a Japanese officer. One night, the Japanese officer was with Flaviana when he got drunk. Flaviana helped the officer back to his quarters, where she poisoned him and smothered him with a pillow, effectively killing him. She would later go on to continue her double agent activities until the end of the war. After the war, she settled down in Talisay, Cebu, where she later died alone in poverty. So, what do you think of these cool badass Filipinas? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the Kabilian Center channel. And we hope to see you in the next episode.